Have you ever noticed how a simple disagreement with a friend or a partner can suddenly start to feel less like a conversation and more like a clinical evaluation? It is a quiet, subtle shift that many of us are starting to observe in our daily lives, where the words we once only heard in a therapist's office are now common currency. In our group chats, our dinner table arguments, and our social media feeds. I want to welcome you to this space, and I want to be very clear from the beginning that this isn't a critique of therapy itself, nor is it a dismissal of the incredible progress we've made in mental health awareness. In fact, it's wonderful that we finally have the tools to talk about our inner worlds with more clarity and compassion than previous generations ever could. However, some people are starting to notice that the very language meant to heal us is sometimes being used in ways that feel a bit different, almost like a new kind of social armor. This is where the shift becomes noticeable. We aren't just talking about our feelings anymore. We are frequently categorizing them, labeling them, and occasionally using those labels to navigate the messy, unpredictable nature of human relationships. It can feel like we've all become armchair psychologists, not because we want to diagnose one another, but because we are searching for a sense of certainty in a world that often feels emotionally overwhelming. When we use words like toxic, gaslighting, or trauma-informed in everyday debates, it's worth wondering if we are bringing ourselves closer together or if we are accidentally building walls. Some notice that when a conflict arises, the immediate impulse is to reach for a clinical term that frames the other person's behavior as a symptom rather than a mistake. This can feel like a safe way to handle pain, because if we can name something with a professional-sounding term, it feels more objective, more valid, and perhaps less personal. But here's where the language starts to change meaning. In the quiet moments of a relationship, the goal is usually connection and understanding. Yet therapeutic language is designed for a very specific professional setting, where one person is there to help another heal. When that same language is brought into a friendship or a romance, it can sometimes create a dynamic of power rather than one of equality. It can feel as though one person is the healed authority and the other is the problem to be managed. Many people find that this makes vulnerability much harder to achieve. If every time I tell you that I'm hurt, I use a phrase like "you are violating my boundaries," or "this is a trauma response," I might be protecting myself, which is sometimes necessary. But I might also be ending the conversation before it even begins. It's increasingly common to hear people talk about setting boundaries as if it's a unilateral decree rather than a shared understanding between two people who care about each other. While boundaries are essential for health and safety, some notice that they are sometimes used as a way to avoid the discomfort of compromise or the labor of listening to a different perspective. It's as if the language of self-care has, in some instances, become a language of self-protection that keeps others at a distance. This isn't because people are being unkind. Often it's because we are all trying so hard to be okay and to do things the right way that we fear the messiness of a raw, unpolished human interaction. Here's where the shift becomes even more interesting. We are living in an era where we have more access to psychological information than ever before, which is an incredible gift, but it also means we are often self-labeling or categorizing our friends based on a 30-second clip or a catchy infographic. It can feel like we are losing the room for people to just be flawed, tired, or momentarily selfish, without those traits being pathologized. When we label a friend as narcissistic because they forgot to check in on us, or describe a partner as gaslighting us when they simply remember a conversation differently, we might be using high-stakes language for low-stakes human errors. This doesn't mean the pain isn't real, but it does change how we resolve it. If someone is labeled as toxic, the only logical solution often feels like removal. If someone is just being difficult or having a bad day, there is room for a conversation, a hug, or an apology. By reaching for the clinical term, we might be skipping the very steps that allow relationships to grow and deepen through conflict. It is increasingly common to hear people say they are holding space or protecting their peace. And while these are beautiful concepts, they can sometimes be used to justify a refusal to engage with anything that feels challenging or inconvenient. It can feel like we are trying to curate our social lives with the same precision a therapist uses to curate a clinical environment, forgetting that life is supposed to be a little bit noisy. and a little bit unrefined. This is where the language starts to change meaning again, moving away from a tool for self-reflection and toward a tool for social signaling. By using the right words, we signal that we are evolved, that we are doing the work, and that we are emotionally intelligent. But real emotional intelligence often looks a lot less like a textbook, and a lot more like staying in the room when things get uncomfortable without needing to label why. Many people find that the most healing moments in their lives didn't involve any therapy speak at all. They involved someone simply saying, "I'm sorry I hurt you," or "I'm struggling right now and I don't know how to fix it." There is a certain humility in being unprocessed that therapy speak sometimes smooths over. It's almost as if we are using these terms to skip the vulnerability of saying, "That made me feel small," or "I'm scared you don't value me." Clinical language offers a sense of armor. It feels more correct and less emotional, ironically. Yet the irony is that we are using this language because we want to be seen and understood. We use big words because we want our big feelings to be taken seriously. If I say I'm triggered, it sounds more urgent than saying I'm upset. If I say you're invalidating me, it sounds more objective than saying it hurts when you disagree with me. We are reaching for these tools because we are hungry for validation. But we might find that the tools themselves are creating a clinical distance between us and the people we love. It can feel like we are talking at each other through glass walls, using the terminology of healing to keep from having to do the messy work of actually being known. Some notice that this trend also leads to a kind of moral superiority, where the person who knows the most terminology wins the argument. If I can frame my perspective in the language of therapy, it becomes very hard for you to disagree, without sounding like you are anti-health or unevolved. This isn't a conscious strategy for most people, it's just the water we are swimming in right now. We want to be good people, and in our current culture, being a good person often means being a healed person. But healing isn't a destination where we finally stop being difficult or stop having conflicts. It's just a process of learning how to be more honest. Perhaps the goal isn't to stop using these words entirely, but to remember that they are just words, pointers toward a deeper reality that is often much more complex than a single label can capture. The issue isn't the care we provide one another or the growth we pursue. It's the way language can sometimes be a detour around accountability. It is much easier to say I need to prioritize my mental health than it is to say I'm avoiding this conversation because I know I was wrong and I'm embarrassed. Both might be true, but one uses the language of therapy to close a door, while the other uses the language of the heart to open one. As we navigate this cultural shift, it's worth reflecting on whether our words are helping us connect or helping us hide. Many people find that when they let go of the need to sound like a therapist, they actually start to feel more like a friend. They find that there is a quiet power in saying I don't know why I feel this way, instead of trying to provide a clinical explanation for every mood. Real connection often requires us to be a little bit lost together, rather than one person acting as the guide and the other as the patient. We are all just people trying to figure out how to love each other well in a complicated world. Mental health awareness is a massive step forward, and it has given so many people the permission they needed to seek help and change their lives. That is a beautiful thing. But as we bring those lessons home, maybe we can leave the clinical clipboards at the door. Maybe we can remember that the most therapeutic thing we can do for someone isn't to analyze them, but to simply be with them. Everyone sounding like a therapist might actually be a sign of how much we all just want to be heard, validated, and held in our imperfections. If we can see the therapy speak as a plea for understanding rather than a weapon of defense, we might find a way back to a more grounded, humble way of relating to one another. It's about finding the balance between using the tools we've learned and keeping our hearts open to the things that can't be taught in a book. Real growth doesn't always have a name, and real healing doesn't always need a diagnosis. It often just needs time, patience, and the courage to be seen as we really are. Messy, unfinished, and deeply human. If this reflection resonated with you, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for being here.